This certainly shocked the NFL world today and all Miami Dolphins fans alike. Mike Tomlin, the 19-year head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, stepped down of that role. Pittsburgh eliminated from the playoffs on Monday night at home by the Houston Texans. And I want to make this abundantly clear. This is not a firing. Tomlin was the one who parted ways with Pittsburgh. What does this mean for Miami in the fallout? I'm Nick Roloff. This is Dolphins Today. And him becoming a free agent with an asterisk. Why is there an asterisk there? Well, it's because the language and the way he stepped down as head coach, it is not a firing. So technically he is still under contract with Pittsburgh, which means he would have to be traded to his next team if he stays wanting to be a head coach in 2026, which is something we'll have to talk about here in just a second. But I would absolutely expect Miami to show interest in potentially getting Mike Tomlin as their next head coach. Now, there's going to be potential interest with him becoming a TV analyst for a year like Sean Payton did and then go back into coaching after a year off. That is certainly a possibility. We'll go through all of the possibilities with Mike Tomlin on today's show, but this does positively impact Miami, at least in one regard, and we'll explain what that is here in a second. But make sure you subscribe to the channel because we cover you on all Miami Dolphins news every single day. 2 videos a day with the latest on the Dolphins head coaching search and more. Join the channel as we're trying to get to 80,000 subscribers sooner rather than later. Now, I want to make this clear. Before we go any further, I will make this statement right now. I do not think he coaches in 2026. I believe he will take the Sean Payton route, which what happened in New Orleans when he ultimately stepped down / retired, whatever you want to call it, for a year, did TV broadcasting, and then, well, all right, I feel rejuvenated after a year off, got back into coaching, and then the Steelers ultimately find a trade partner and get compensation in return for Mike Tomlin. It was also said by many others, including Adam Schefter of ESPN, that he expects Tomlin to not coach in 2026. And you see Andrew Marchand here, who covers a lot of the broadcasting news around the world, that every single outlet, whether it's Fox, ESPN, NBC, CBS, all will have interest and will be lining up to get Tomlin to their broadcast center. Not probably a play-by-play guy, but one of those analysts in the pregame, postgame type of shows. I mentioned it just a second ago. Schefter said TV as well. So even though we're going to talk about what this means for Miami in terms of Tomlin becoming available potentially to be a head coach somewhere else, I do not think he is coaching and on sidelines in 2026. But if he were to be, this is a guy that you have to go for right away, right? Similar to John Harbaugh, you can make a push an argument for who is the better head coach candidate between the two because both have a 61% career win percentage. Both have exactly 1 Super Bowl under their belt. Harbaugh coming in the early 2010s. Tomlin's coming in 2008. Obviously, Tomlin has never had a losing season. That is the main thing when people talk about him. He goes 500 or better in all 19 years as head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if we're going to also be honest here, he's never really gotten over the top. He is the model for consistency. But if you want to win a Super Bowl, I mean, Tomlin really hasn't been that guy. He won it, obviously, with Big Ben in 2008. But since then, even with some really talented teams in the early 2010s, having James Harrison, having Palomalu, Big Ben, and then Le'Veon Bell, and having Antonio Brown, like they never really got over the hump, which is maybe a testament of Tomlin's inability to really rise to the occasion. But do you want the Dolphins to go after Mike Tomlin, even with the reports that he's likely going to be in broadcast next year? Let me know. Pin comment on today's show. Y for yes or N for no. Well, there's already connections being made between Miami and Tomlin. 2 reporters, specifically Tom Pelissero of NFL Network and Josina Anderson, have already connected Miami to Mike Tomlin, saying that it would make sense for the Dolphins to go after him, and they will certainly kick the tires as hard as possible. We know Miami considered hiring Mike Tomlin around that 2007 period when he was hired as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. Miami ultimately passed, and, well, it's one of the biggest regrets Stephen Ross and this Dolphins ownership group probably has in their entire career. But him becoming available does help Miami, at least in some regard, in my belief. Even if he doesn't coach in 2026. The idea that he could be available to become a head coach for you in 2026 will make teams interested, and it will have a trickle down effect. Because what if, I'm not saying it will happen, but just what if the Miami Dolphins ultimately pursue Tomlin, but so do the Steelers, or excuse me, the Giants, so do the Atlanta Falcons, and then their pursuit of Mike Tomlin ultimately allows John Harbaugh to maybe slip in the cracks to where Miami could land him, even if they don't get Mike Tomlin. I do think that is an absolute possibility here that we're going to further explore. But this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The playoff action in football rolls on with elite hoops every single night. And if you want to start making player picks for the first time, PrizePicks is the best place to do that because they let you take control. How you want to play is up to you. If you want flexibility, choose the flex play, where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you want the biggest payouts, go for the power play. No matter your play, PrizePicks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Available in all 50 states. It's so easy to play. Like I said, just pick more or less on a couple player stat projections. You see my entry for the divisional round of the playoffs, less than Brock Purdy passing yards in that matchup with Seattle, more than Matthew Stafford passing yards against that Bears secondary. Jordan Love just went for 300, by the way. And less than Bo Nix passing yards against the Buffalo Bills. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. I briefly mentioned it, and I want to hammer home this part before we move on a little bit here. But Tomlin will become the top head coaching candidate for mostly everybody. You'll have to make the argument who is a better head coaching candidate between Tomlin and Harbaugh. But without a question, if Tomlin actually did want to coach in the NFL in 2026, him and Harbaugh would be 1A, 1B. Which, as I mentioned, would create a trickle-down effect potentially to positively impact Miami. Say the Dolphins are the number 2 choice for John Harbaugh and the Giants are number 1. But Tomlin ultimately gets pursued heavily by the Giants and the Giants get Tomlin. Well, then that makes the Dolphins potentially the top option for John Harbaugh. But the same could also be said about other head coaching candidates like Robert Saleh, Kevin Stefanski. Tomlin and Harbaugh not going to Miami could ultimately help the Dolphins land the best other candidate out there. So there is a trickle-down effect of Tomlin being available, even if Miami ultimately doesn't land him. But then there's this part as well here, which we alluded to in the first couple of minutes of today's episode. But because of the way the contract ultimately played out, the Steelers did not fire Tomlin. He stepped down. It means the Steelers still hold his head coaching rights, which means if you want Mike Tomlin to be your next head coach, you would have to trade for him. And I am out on that idea. Mike Tomlin is a heck of a coach. He is right up there with Harbaugh in terms of his resume and ability to elevate your roster and your floor as a football organization. But I have said this in the past. I will continue to say it. I could not be more out on trading for a head coach. I know it has worked for Denver. It has worked for others in the past, like the Buccaneers acquiring John Gruden and the Patriots even making a trade with the Jets for Bill Belichick. But to me, I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Now, you can make the argument, all right, Miami trades pick number 11 to the Steelers for Mike Tomlin in pick 21, so you move back 10 spots in the first round of the draft in that April 2026 draft and then get Mike Tomlin. Sure, maybe, but I just think trading for a head coach doesn't make a lot of sense for Miami. I will never understand why people trade for head coaches. Do you feel that incompetent in your ability to hire a head coach potentially? But I get it. Tomlin's that type of guy that intrigues you. I don't think it's smart for Miami to trade for a head coach, period, which is why I think I would actually let Tomlin go somewhere else and pursue the John Harbaughs, the Robert Salehs, and some of these other candidates available right now. Let's move on here and round out today's show with some more Dolphins news. And on tomorrow morning, stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed because we got even more coaching news and rumors here. But I did want to carry a couple things here, and that is a change in the front office. Diana Russini reporting that the Dolphins have parted ways with assistant GM Marvin Allen. Allen has been with Miami since 2019, obviously served that assistant GM role to Chris Grier. Not a surprise that Jon-Eric Sullivan is moving on with him. And I am just excited for a complete overhaul inside the Dolphins coaching staff, but also the front office, because not every position will be ultimately replaced with guys that Eric Sullivan feels comfortable with. There will be people that stay from the past regime into this current regime. I don't want that getting twisted, but I do like Jon-Eric Sullivan handpicking guys from other organizations that he knows from his days as a scout in the 2000s and 2010s, or from the Green Bay Packers organization over the last 3 to 5 years. Like, I want him surrounding himself with people that are like him in terms of his mindset, how to build a football team, and work ethic. So people in high-profile positions as scouts, GMs, player personnel in Miami, likely we're going to see some shifting around here unless Jon-Eric Sullivan really likes the conversations that he has with them after this past week of being hired as new GM. But we also have Jon-Eric Sullivan bringing in a player that he's familiar with here, and we'll probably see a lot of this throughout the offseason. But Omar Brown has been signed to a future contract with the Dolphins, which means he'll be here throughout the offseason program in May, June, July, in training camp, preseason this August with Miami. Who is Omar Brown? Quickly, we'll let you know on his information. 25 years old, was a UDFA in 2024 out of Nebraska, originally signed with the Denver Broncos, but was later released and then scooped up by the Green Bay Packers, obviously where Sullivan's coming from before his new gig with Miami. Spent 2024 on the Packers practice squad, actually got elevated 3 times. Remember, you get 3 elevations if you're on the practice squad throughout a year. Was elevated in week 16, week 17, week 18 of that 2024 season. Was signed to a futures contract with Green Bay in 2025, but ultimately got placed on IR prior to the season beginning, which forced him to miss the entire year. You look at his career preseason stats, nothing serious here, just 114 snaps, 6 tackles, 22 yards allowed, 97.2 QB rating when in coverage. I just like Sully taking control early. Like, this is his job. This is his team. Like, I know we're still looking for a new head coach, and we'll have questions on the quarterback this offseason as well. But Sullivan will have a lot of autonomy here in terms of making decisions inside the front office, the coaching staff, who to add to this roster as depth pieces potentially. I'm very excited to see what he continues to do here in Miami, and we'll have you covered every step of the way. So make sure you are subscribed. Video coming out tomorrow morning on the latest around the Dolphins head coaching search, news, rumors. So be on the lookout for that, and see you then.